All right, so we should be live now. Hello, everybody. How is your Monday going? Curly, it's so humid out. It's messing with my hair and messing with everything. That's why I do my hair curly in the summer because I have natural curly hair. And it keeps it from being just a humid, frizzy mess. If I tried straightening it, it'd just be pure frizz. That's all it would be. I feel very low today. Let's see. All right. It's a little better. I feel like get everything adjusted here. All right. I feel a little bit higher now. Okay, so let's get right into this subject. I already got the notification for it. If you do not have the notifications turned on, just click on the bell and then you should be able to, it should give you a notification when I go live. So I don't think I really need to post this. I can go ahead and post it. I actually get more views when I do post it in the group. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, go ahead and look for it. Gently Led Sisters. It is a private group, but you should be able to find it. And we just have to make sure that you're a woman and all that before you join. We have almost 500 women in there. And there's a lot of good posts and a lot of good advice given. But that's on Facebook. Hey, Julia. I do need to be better about making posts about the subject of the day too, because that reminds people that it's going on. Okay, so let's get into it. So I remember when I was talking to a local newspaper guy a few months ago about the reasons I didn't want my kids in public school. One of the things that I brought up was that I wanted to be in charge of educating them on private things such as the birds and the bees. I don't want the public schools to be the ones doing that, especially when they have an agenda. I firmly believe in two genders, and that's it. I still believe that sodomy is a sin, and I don't want my kids to be brainwashed and thinking that's an acceptable lifestyle or whatever you call it. Just as I think that drinking is a sin and also has consequences, doing drugs is a sin and has consequences. All sin brings consequences, and it's a fact that sexual sin is promoted and encouraged in worldly systems. However, this issue is something that we as parents need to be open with our kids about and to tackle with our kids. We can't just shield them from knowing anything. I think sometimes we can go over the top and almost create a curiosity that they would not have had we never talked about this. I think specifically of the Duggar family. They were so over the top with modesty that anytime they were in public and they saw a scantily clad woman, they would yell Nike, and the boys had to look at the ground and look away, whatever. It just made it awkward. I believe this made the subject very taboo to talk about and created an environment where it made it seem so elusive that the kids were tempted to look into it themselves rather than being taught by the parents that, yes, there will always be beautiful women. There will always be beautiful women that dress immodestly. You know, what you need to learn is that you are in control of your actions and you need to learn to say no to temptation. And we see the result in the sexual sin that eventually occurred with Josh. He had not learned to say no to temptation, actually, in any instance, because he was pretty much giving in to every fleshly desire there near the end. So how do we have an honest but age-appropriate discussion with our kids? Let's dive into that subject today. So the first thing that I would say is consider their age. So you need to consider their age when it comes to this topic. Obviously, you want to, a 5-year-old doesn't need to be told things that you tell your kids or an adult right before marriage, as they're growing and maturing. A 5-year-old doesn't even need to be told the same things as a 12-year-old. It's very age-appropriate things. Reserve some of those things for right before the marriage. Now, that being said, I want to talk first before we really delve into everything about how communication is really not just for this topic. It should be a way of life. And I really think that this, along with anything else, hinges on just creating an environment in your home where your kids feel comfortable talking to you about things, about anything, whether that's if they have a crush on a boy or a crush on a girl, whether that's, you know, the struggles that they're going through or different temptations or whatever life throws their way, that they need to be able to come to you with anything that they have, a question about or whatever. So, communication first and foremost, that really, really hinges, that's the basis or the foundation for creating this environment of just your kids being able to be open and honest with you about things, that show them that they can come to you with anything. So don't freak out if they have questions. That's one of the things to creating this open environment of, this open line of communication. When they do come to you with something, don't panic, don't hit the ceiling, don't get super upset or frustrated or yell or scream or whatever. Prove to them that you can be someone that's safe to talk to. Being attracted to the opposite sex is normal. And in today's day and age, you want that for your kids, right? So you want your boys to be interested in girls, and you want your girls to be interested in boys and all that. So it's completely normal. It's a completely good thing in life. It's a good thing to find a spouse and get married, but it should be taught from the time that they're young that physical relationship is reserved for marriage. Let's do things God's way. And that starts very young, and it can look different, such as, what was it? With your little kids, if you're watching a TV show or something and they kiss, you can tell them, you should only kiss after you get married, different things like that. And even our littles know the way that we do dating in our house. They know that there's always a chaperone, and they know that someone's always, in the room with the dating couple, and they're learning that really, really young. And so there is even age appropriate things that you can do. Start training them young. Start teaching them that, you only hold hands with a boy after you get married. And, we do promote the purity culture in our home. And I think it's a good thing. And I think it's a wise thing. And I'm going to keep teaching it to my kids. It worked for my husband and I. It's working for my kids. So we're going to keep on doing that. So be matter of fact from the time that they're small. Don't treat it like it's this, mystical, mysterious, whatever. But another thing that this all comes down to is, and we'll talk about it too, but just, being age appropriate, but also just using good terms, not being crass, not being too suggestive or too deep with some of this stuff. So but yeah, be matter of fact from the time they are small. Obviously, gender in your family is going to make a difference based off of how you interact with your kids. Dads probably do better talking to their sons about things. Moms do better talking to their daughters about things. Also, if you have a home full of 6 boys, that's going to look different from my home that's filled with, both my boys are married now and out of the house, and I only have 6 girls left at home. So obviously things are going to be a little bit different. I do believe if you have a bunch of family of girls, it's okay to let them be aware of different things that are going to be happening as they get older when it comes to their cycle and different changes their body is going to go through. But obviously that would be a discussion behind closed doors if there are brothers, because, younger brothers don't need to be hearing things like that. So gender in your family does make a difference when it comes to these topics of conversation. If you have like equal number of girls, boys, like I said, the dad might need to he might need to be one to tell the boys something, where mom might need to be the one to tell girls something or whatever. So, yeah, we have a lot of girls now and no boys left at home. The only one is my husband. So we're more open about things that we want to be maybe if the boys were around, because I want my girls to know what's going on from a week to week basis and different things like that. Now, when they're younger, without using, not that I think the correct like the, how do I say it? Anatomical. Not that I think that the correct words for those aren't okay or whatever. You have to decide what you want for your home. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting into right now, Julia. She said, I've heard giving things cute nicknames instead of biologically accurate names can cause trouble if they're ever targeted for SA, making them easier targets. Do you have an opinion on that? I do. I'm not comfortable with really using the biologically accurate names. So for us, I think once again, this comes down to just being open about certain things that are okay and certain things that aren't. And that I was just about to go into age appropriate things that you can start when they're young. When my kids get old enough to communicate, we play the body game, I call it. And I'll tell them, listen, there are certain places in your body that are more private than others. And there are people that, are bad people. And you need to tell mommy and daddy if someone ever touches you these certain places. And I'll say, like, can anyone touch you here? Yes. Can anyone touch you here? Yes. And I'll point to the different areas, and then I'll teach them what their private areas are. And then I'll teach them what's okay. Like if, someone touches their shoulder, that's fine, but if any of these other areas are ever touched, I want you to come to tell mommy right away, tell daddy right away, etc. So, that's kind of how we've always done it. There's some families that they prefer the biologically correct, and that just comes down to what you're comfortable with. You have to decide that. I don't think it's detrimental either way, honestly. It's just whatever you're comfortable with as a family. So, but yeah, we will, with the younger kids, we'll start very early being open and communicating about things like that, because unfortunately there are cases of SA. I'm going to refer to it as that so I don't get flagged, but SA, there are things that happen in the church, which it never should. There are things like that. That's why, even in our church, we have windows on all the doors. We have, because we never even want a hint of anything like that going on here. So, we're family integrated. That's not to say it could never happen. And so if it did, I would want to nip it in the bud right away and get, that person prosecuted to the full extent of the law and all that. So that's why I've tried to teach my kids from the time they're young. You can come to me with anything, any concern. If someone even makes you feel weird, if they're saying things, and that's another thing too, you can even teach your kids about inappropriate things to say and not to say. We don't talk about private things. We don't talk about private areas of our body, not with our friends. No one talks about things like that with you. If anyone ever tries, you come tell me. If your friends are even joking about it, I want to know, different things like that, because there is inappropriate communication as well. And oftentimes when adults will do that with children, it's a way of grooming them, a way of seeing what they can get away with. And so we, as the parents, we need to watch out for that. We need to know if there's an adult that's grooming our kids in any weird, perverse way. So that's another thing too, that we will, and I didn't even have that in my notes, but now that we're talking about this, it came to mind. There are grooming things that abusers can do when it comes to communication. Yes, that is another red flag. If they say it's our little secret, don't tell your mom and dad, don't ever tell anyone about this. And so we'll even tell our kids from the time they're little, listen, you're not supposed to have secrets from mommy and daddy. So if anyone ever tells you that something's a secret, I need to know about it, and so far it's worked really well for us. And there are horrible things that happen. And if you are a victim of SA, please definitely tell someone, reach out. If it's something that could be prosecuted, that person needs to be put in jail where they can't hurt anyone else, because statistics show that abusers, it's usually by the time a victim comes forth, they're not the first victim, and they won't be the last if they don't come forth either. So statistically, there's been many previous victims. And if that person doesn't get prosecuted, doesn't get arrested, doesn't get put behind bars, there's going to be even more victims. So if you are a victim of that and there's something you can do about it, such as going to the authorities, telling your parents, getting that person arrested, please do it, because you're probably saving so many other girls from being abused by the same perpetrator. So yeah, definitely. That is a huge red flag. So all those things we have definitely told our children as they're growing up. Even us just at home, we have roosters and hens. So, our girls see kind of what goes on with that. And we're like, yeah, that's just biology. That's how they're mating. And that's what puts the little chick in the egg and all that stuff. So, we're just pretty matter of fact about it without going into detail of exactly what's happening. Right. And obviously in our home, we emphasize that there is a difference between boys and girls, but we don't go into detail about what those differences are. We don't show pictures. I do believe that if you have a little kid, and that's why you even have to be careful about things that you might have laying around the house that little eyes could get curious about. And I just had this discussion with some of my friends that could even be in birthing books, just any type of nudity involved. You want to be careful about subjecting little kids to that, because that's going to make an imprint on their brain, and one that might cause problems further down the road. So definitely watch out movies that you watch, nudity, any type of nudity, any type of physical scene that's reserved for the marriage bed. I wouldn't subject little kids to or let them see that, different things like that. So, we encourage modesty in our home, but we aren't over the top about it, because you got to remember, little kids grow into modesty. It's usually, I've noticed, around the time when they recognize that there's sin, and they recognize differences between good and bad and different things like that. They kind of come into that awareness. It's almost like when Adam and Eve were in the garden and they suddenly knew the difference, the tree of knowledge and good and evil, right? They suddenly knew the difference. They suddenly realized, whoa, we're naked, and it's almost the same with little kids. And that's age is different. Sometimes it's really early. It's 3 or 4. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 with kids, but little kids grow into modesty, usually around the age between 5 or 6. Before then, they're totally innocent. You can have a 1-year-old in its diaper. It's like totally innocent and pure and, different things like that. So, we aren't really weird about, if the 1-year-old's running around in a diaper, we're not going to make it weird. The 1-year-old's running around in a diaper, So they're going to eventually realize that they need to cover up and they need to be modest and different things like that. Usually it's around 5 or 6, around that time. Before then, though, it's totally innocent. I do teach my girls to sit like girls, be modest, etc., but I'm also not over the top about that as well. And I teach my girls that it's okay to be modest and fashionable at the same time. They don't need to dress in a gunny sack. They don't need to purposely make themselves look unattractive. They can still be pretty and feminine in a fashionable way. So one of the biggest things when it comes to this, just remaining innocent and remaining pure until you are an adult, is phones. Phones is huge. And with phones comes a lot of responsibility. And, what we've tried to do with our kids, we've tried to teach them that the phone itself is not evil. It's what you do with that. Just like guns in and of themselves are not evil. It's the person holding the gun that is evil. Food is not evil. And we're not evil for shoveling food in our mouth, but I'm saying food just sitting there is not what's making us fat. It's us overeating, being gluttonous, that's what's making us fat. So we can't blame the food for that. There are a lot of good things that can come from using your phone. With our kids, they don't normally get a phone until they have their driver's license. That's just kind of the way we do it. We don't see a need before then. We don't allow social media until they're 15, I believe is the first time. And then with all of our kids, they've gotten on Instagram around 15, but then they don't get Facebook until they're 18. I don't know why. That's just kind of how it works. And with all of them, they've been very trustworthy when it comes to having social media platforms and stuff. So we haven't really had any issues there. But we've taught our kids that a phone has the potential to ruin, and things that they put on the phone, things they look at in the phone, has the potential to ruin future relationships, the way their brain works, the way their brain is wired, etc. So another thing that we do is we use real life examples, of people that we have known that they got involved in stuff on the phone that wasn't good. And it ended up rewiring their brain, rewiring how they thought. That affected future relationships, that affected marriages, that affected all these things just by them going on the phone, getting involved in stuff. And then they went down a dark, deeper and deeper into this sin and into darker and darker things. And it really did a lot of damage. And so we've known real life examples, we've used them. It's very sobering for our kids to see things in real life, right? It makes it seem real, makes it seem like, oh, mom and dad aren't being weird about this. This actually has done damage in someone else's life. So one thing I did when my boys had first gotten phones was I did have them put their phones on the table before they went to bed every night, because I do think that just mindlessly scrolling and maybe late at night, it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, they're curious, they're just laying in bed scrolling, that has the potential to be a huge danger. So we did have them put their phones on the table at night before they went to bed. They don't need to be up for 2 hours anyway scrolling. They don't need to be, having unfettered access at things all alone, in the dark of the night. So I do think that kids tend to get into more trouble with stuff like that late at night. So we would always, a lot of times I would turn off the Wi-Fi at night. That's something you can do too. I had safeguards in place, especially at a very vulnerable age. And as the parent, it's okay for you to be like that. It's okay for you to set boundaries in your home, and it's okay for you to have certain rules and guidelines. And whatever is going to work good for your family, do it. I would say have something though. Don't give your kids unfettered access to the world. It's a huge responsibility. And, you really have to have a lot of self-control and have clear-cut boundaries in your own personal life that you've decided to put there. It's a huge responsibility, and maybe a responsibility that every kid is not ready for. And if there have been times in your kid's life or your child's life where you've seen kind of a breach of trust, maybe it's not the phone, but you've caught them watching things on television that they know would not be good. You wouldn't allow this. You've caught them doing things that went against, they're being sneaky about it, right? It's up to you to decide if they're even ready for a phone at that age, or it's up to you you don't have to get them a smartphone. You could get them one of those brick phones. I think they still have them. You could get them a phone that doesn't have Wi-Fi, that only works on Wi-Fi. That wouldn't be good if they're driving though. So no, you could get them a phone that doesn't have, it's just like literally the buttons that you push, like how you used to have to text. You're the parent, you're paying the bill, so you can decide what kind of phone they want. But there are still phones that are not smartphones that have all the apps and the internet accessibility and all of that. There are still phones like that. So if you have a child that has, breached that trust, you can do that until they regain their trust, until they've shown that they're wise and that they have self-control. Track phone, yes, that's it. And I know they're at Walmart. You can buy them. You can put minutes on them. That way they have it. If there's an emergency, if they're driving and they need to get a hold of you, they need to call the tow truck, whatever, they have that capability. But they don't have the World Wide Web and all of these apps that they can, Snapchat. And I don't even know, is Snapchat even still a thing? I don't know. Whatever it is. I just know Snapchat was like totally preached about years ago because I guess the pictures disappear. I've never had it. So I guess the pictures disappear or something. So you can send really raunchy stuff, but then the picture goes away. So no one really knows about it. But once again, if a kid has a sneaky disposition, they're going to find a way to be sneaky. So that's, once again, is why you really have to know your child's heart. You have to know, how is the relationship with God? How is their relationship with me? Is this a child who's always trying to get away with what they can get away with? Or have they purposed in their heart that they're not going to do certain things, they're not going to look at certain things? And this is one area where I really think us going to like conferences and camps and things has really helped my kids, because they have focused, the preachers focus a lot on purity of your mind and purity in body, and, not sitting evil things before you. And they focus on a lot of the dangers that teenagers face in today's world with the technology. Technology in and of itself is not evil, but technology can warp your mind depending on what you look at, depending on what you're interested in, depending on what you Google. I guess it's not Google anymore, what you chat GPT. It's technology is not the evil things. That's why you have to teach your kids and train your kids self-control, what you should look at, what you shouldn't look at, etc. So tell them that what they can post online can affect future jobs as well, because nowadays most employers will look through your social media accounts. They will Google your name. They will see what comes up. They're going to comb through all of that, and they'll do that before hiring. And, if they're on there just posting horrible stuff or, crass language or profanity, that's going to affect their chances of getting hired. So we've always told our kids a written word online will last forever. And they've seen real life examples of this, and it's really helped drive the point home. But yes, once you put a written word, it doesn't matter if it's in a group chat, someone's going to screenshot it. It doesn't matter if it's a Facebook post and then you delete it 1 minute after, someone will have screenshotted it. Doesn't matter if it's a comment and then you regret that comment, you take it down, someone will have screenshotted it. There's someone who's always watching you, even if you're not well known, even if you only have a few friends, there's someone always watching you. And there's someone that's always going to screenshot whatever you're putting out there. So we've always told them, once you write or post something, it's out there forever and you can never take it back because someone will have screenshot it. Tell them not to Google things or chat GPT things, but rather come talk to you. And that's where this open line communication really is important, because if you have that, they're going to feel comfortable talking to you about stuff. You can use filters if they do have a smartphone. You can get things to be a filter, but I know that there's ways around that too. And if they're smart and they want to find a way, they'll do it. I believe they had put filters on Josh Duggar's stuff as well, but he found a way to bypass that. And that's when he got involved in the really dark, horrible stuff that he got sent to prison for. But I think they had, what is it? I keep thinking VidAngel, but that's not it. What's the one that's on your phone? It's very, very popular. Actually, when my son was in college, it was required that he had it on his phone, and then he had to have someone else. So I was the other one. And like, I remember you got sent things like this, Tommy was looking at this, and it was literally like a picture of a football player. But it had been flagged. I have no idea why. If anyone can remember the name of that, put it in the comments. I can't remember the name of it. It's like on your phone, and it basically like analyzes whatever they're looking at, all the pictures they're sending, like everything. If they're FaceTiming, it'll like analyze everything. And then you have someone that you're accountable to. And if you are looking at something they think it's suggestive, they'll send it to the person who you're accountable to. So there are things like that where if you follow that and you don't try to get around it, it might be a good accountability to kind of keep you in line if you've struggled with that in the past. But like I said, most people who are determined to sin will find ways around that. So once again, it's a heart thing. Rather than freaking out over stuff, explain why stuff is wrong, such as if they have questions about kissing, whatever it is, a physical relationship after marriage, start when they're young, explaining why you do things the way that you do them or whatever. If they've seen something and they are concerned, teach them to come to you about it, And once again, that just comes to not panicking or freaking out if they have a legitimate, question or concern. I saw a video of a woman dancing this way. Is this okay? Rather than be like, why didn't you turn it off? Why were you watching video of a woman dancing. You tell them, no, it's not exactly right. We're not honoring God by moving our body that way, because we're being flirty, I guess would be a good name when they're younger. And no, we want to be God honoring with our bodies. So, we're going to not do that, or we're going to do this or whatever. Don't give cell phones to kids. Just don't, as far as unfettered access. I'm even careful if my kids are watching, which my husband has banned YouTube. He got really sick of like all these YouTube channels that they're pretty much just like dropping advertisements for kids. He hates it so much. So he's like, no YouTube unless they're watching like Bluey on YouTube or something. And then that's allowed, but no just random YouTube channels, Mr. Beast or Dude Perfect or something. He's like, no, we're done with that. So, but even that, they could unwittingly click on something that is suddenly in their brain forever. Some of us are visual. I'm a visual learner myself. I'm not auditory. And so that's why when I read, I retain a lot better than if I hear. So if I see an image, I can remember it a lot better than if someone described it to me. So you have to be really careful, especially with those of your kids who are visual learners, because oftentimes if they see an image, it's not going to go out of their head. And they'll remember that for the rest of their life. I still remember when I was 4 or 5, we were at family's house and the kids were supposed to be outside playing or something. And all of the adults were watching this horror show and a horror movie in the other room. And I had snuck in there without anyone knowing. And I was very quiet and I was watching. And it was this horror movie about a clown that was like, I remember a parking garage and I remember a bathroom. So I don't even know what this movie is. Still don't know. But I remember he was going around killing people, this killer clown. And then my dad noticed I was in there and he's like, Cassie, Ray, get out of here, because he was all embarrassed because it was only supposed to be adults watching this horror movie. But I was literally 4 or 5 and I can still see those pictures in my mind. And ever since that age, I was afraid of clowns. Ever since I saw the killer clown, I've been afraid of clowns. And I see a clown now and it does not like give me good butterfly feelings. It gives me a panicky, like, oh my goodness, he's going to hurt me type of feeling. And it's literally was it the movie It? Because does he go around in parking garages and is there a bathroom or something and he's killing people? I don't know. Maybe it was. This would have been like 1985 or 1986, around that age. I might have even been younger. I still remember it though. That's one of my earliest memories of like a movie. So yeah. So all that to say, your kid, if they're 2, 3, 4, and they visually see something, they could possibly remember that for the rest of their lives. So we have to be very vigilant about that. Be careful getting our kids phones. I don't believe in middle schoolers having phones. Why? There's no need for it, especially when you homeschool and you're literally like homeschooling, going to church, homeschooling, going to church. Why does a middle schooler need a phone? I don't understand it. And then also, we've tried to keep our kids off social media until they're a later teen, until they've shown with some maturity and that they're trustworthy, etc. So that's phones is a huge part of this innocence. And you want to keep kids as innocent as long as possible. I mean, obviously, if they're guys, they're going to be around things in the workplace. But I remember even from the time that our boys got their first detasseling job, we told them, we said, now they were 12. So they were 12 and we were like, they didn't have phones. No, they didn't, because they had to use their boss's phone to ever call us when we needed to pick them up. But we were like, you're going to be around teenagers that have phones. If they ever want to show you something or get you interested in seeing something on their phone, tell them no thanks. Like, because we know how older teen boys can be. And oftentimes when they are sinning, they want younger kids to sin along with them. And so we always told them, you don't get sucked into like looking at things, dirty jokes. You don't have to listen. You don't have to partake in the cursing and the cussing. And so from the time that they were 12, they were around other kids that use language that they didn't use and, talked about inappropriate things. There were times when they would just walk away from a conversation. So obviously you can't shield them forever. I understand that, but you want to keep them innocent about things as long as you can within reason, without making it seem weird or, whatever. So that brings me to my next point with not making things awkward. So, we've always just been kind of matter of fact about things and age appropriate type things. So for an example, maybe I'm trying to think of what an example would be. When they're young, we often tell them when they ask about how does the baby get in mommy's belly? I'll use that for an example. With younger kids, it'll be God put you in my belly. God put the baby in my belly. And then, well, how did I come out? Well, you came out through my stomach. We'll say things like that. As they get a little bit older, that will go more in depth with what we tell them, the logistics and different things like that. So, I've always just kind of told it how it is, not really blushing about it or making it awkward, because they do need to learn from a young age that the physical relationship is good and having babies after marriage is good, but it's reserved for the marriage bed, and we've often used that to have them work towards that goal. If you're a boy, and yeah, a wife is a good thing, physical relationship is a good thing. If you want that, here's what you have to do to achieve that. You have to be a hard worker. You can't be lazy. You have to be able to provide for your wife. That's why you need to stay in school and you need to get your high school diploma. And that's why you might need to do specialized training in school after that if you want something, because if you want a woman, that's a good thing, but you've got to do this, this, and this to get to that point. And so my husband's always kind of used that as an incentive to get our boys from point A to point B. And it worked very well with both of the boys. So, I want my kids to talk to me. I don't want them to just be sneaky about things. And I've observed through my years of being a mom, and I've observed through my years of ministry, that there are some parents that are very strict. And I don't necessarily disagree with their rules, but because they don't have their kids' hearts, their kids are just sneaky and they find ways to break rules in whatever manner that they can. They kind of laugh at their parents because their parents have these rules and the kids just know they're going to break them. And they look for, they look for more and more ways to break them and sneakier and sneakier ways to get away with things and sneakier ways to break the rules and to go behind their parents' back. And I don't want kids who are sneaky. I want them to be able to feel safe in talking to me. Have my kids ever done sneaky things? Probably. I probably don't know about it. I'll probably learn about it when they're like 30 years old and they finally decide to tell me. We all have a sin nature, and I'm sure that they have. But overall, it's been a pretty open line of communication as far as I know. So, don't freak out if they do mess up. Just get good accountability in their lives. If you have a child that will come to you without any pressure and tell you, I'm so sorry, mom, I did this. That's a blessing. If you have a child that will do that, that you have your child's heart. That they are, first of all, they're ashamed that they did it in front of the Lord. Second of all, you have a good relationship with them where they feel safe in telling you because they know you're not going to go over the top with the punishment. They know that you're not going to freak out, yell, scream, whatever. So don't freak out if they mess up. Just get good accountability in their lives. From the time that our kids are young, we've really stressed this, if the punishment's going to be a lot less if you just come to me and tell me, if you're open about it. If we find out you're lying to us or you've been sneaking around, it's going to be more so the choice is up to you. Are you just going to fess up, or are we going to have to dig and, have a judge and jury and get all your sisters in here and do an investigation? It's going to go a lot better for you if we don't have to do this investigation. And that has seemed to work pretty well in our lives. So, and then number 8, have dating standards in your home. And this is really big in our home. Teach them that this dating time is where they prove to themselves and to the person that they're marrying that they can exhibit self-control. It's a very good way for them to deny their flesh and for them to just hang on and just do things the right way, because it's going to be a lot better when they wait. Have a goal, in mind when they start the dating relationship. So, take it seriously. With our kids, since we don't allow them to enter into a relationship before they're 18, it's always, anytime they enter a relationship, it's with the goal of marriage, possibly, so they're serious about it. It's not just for, just to goof off or whatever. They're serious about it. So, for us, we try to really enforce the whole, it's always best if you wait until marriage and all this stuff. And, that's the best way. You'll have a really good foundation for your marriage after that, because you've proven to your wife, I can wait. I can say no to temptation. I can have self-control, different things like that. So with our kids, the goal is getting to the marriage altar pure, because that's going to set the tone for their future relationship with their spouse. If you've messed up in your life, you don't have to tell them all the details of what happened, but you can let them know, we messed up, but we want better for you. So a lot of parents, they don't want to be hypocrites, right? Like, how can I expect my kid to do this when, I didn't even do it? Like, I didn't marry pure. Well, maybe you were saved later in life and you hadn't been taught that. So because you're saved now and you're having your children are being born into this Christian household, they already have a better foundation. So you can just tell them, I messed up. The Lord wasn't in my life. I didn't know biblical principles, but I see now that biblical principles work so well. And, I want that for you, because I want you to do better than I did. I want you to have bigger blessings, and I want you to have a better start to your marriage. And I want you to have no baggage when you go into marriage. It's okay to train your kids to do things differently than you did, especially if you're older and you've learned from mistakes, right? You messed up in the past. That was in the past, but I want my kids to do this. I want my kids to do better. So use real life examples of those who have done it right and those who have done it wrong. These people did it right. They've now been married for a quarter of a century. They've had a whole bundle of kids. They had no baggage going into marriage. They're happy and they're healthy. And, these ones, they kind of had a rough start. And yeah, they've survived, but they had a lot of baggage to work through. And, obviously the main thing in their mind needs to be marriages for life. We're going to work through whatever problems come up. But I'm telling you, when two people marry that have pure backgrounds, similar, they've been raised in a Christian home, they've saved themselves for each other, it's pretty miraculous how God can use them. And just there's always going to be problems to work through, because every person is from a different culture. But it's pretty awesome when two young people come together who have done things right, who have been raised in a Christian home. They have an awesome start to their marriage. Awesome start. So, and it's okay to want that for your kids, and it's okay to train your kids in that way. So don't be crass when it comes to this subject. There are delicate ways to go about talking about things without getting explicit. My husband likes to use the illustration of just Bible language, right? He said the Bible gets things away, and it gets things across in a way where you can freely talk about or read certain parts of the Bible in mixed company. You can talk about it with men and women around, with little kids in the audience. You don't have to get explicit. And I don't believe Christians should get explicit in this. While I do believe you need to be open about it and not in an awkward way, like I said, when it comes to like biological anatomy terms, you have to decide what you do for your family, whether or not you're comfortable with it. But that's part of the reason I feel like it's a little crass. So that's why I'm not super comfortable with using the biologically correct terms most of the time. And you can disagree with me. I don't care. That's just how I feel. I like the Bible language, though, where it'll even talk about, and he knew his wife. What do you mean? Well, obviously he knew his wife. He was married to her. But we know as adults that it has a different meaning. So I really like the way the Bible language is, because you know what he's talking about, without it getting explicit or in detail, you know? So it's a part of life. So don't act like your kid is weird for being interested in that part of life, but also teach them that there's appropriate things, there's appropriate times to talk about it, there's not appropriate times to talk about it. It's not appropriate to talk about it with your friends. But if you have a question, definitely come to me and we can talk about it. You know, watch the language you use about it, because it's no secret that the F word is one of the most crass words in English. And the fact that it has to do with something sexual, someone's language says a lot about what's going on in their head and their heart. And so if someone is comfortable using that word, there's probably a lot going on in their mind and their heart. So that's a word that will never be uttered in our home ever. And if someone's comfortable with saying that, well, for me, I just want to be close to that person. I'm not going to be close with a person who says that every other word. It's just, I would be so uncomfortable around that, because it is a very strong word. And I know it's losing its strength in today's language, and it's almost becoming more like a lesser curse word, but it still has a strong meaning. And so I will never be comfortable with people using that word around me. And I don't think it has any place in a Christian's home. I don't think that does, along with any curse word. And so I do think we need to be selective too, even when talking about private, personal things, that we don't get too crass and too descriptive when it comes to these things. You know, overall, the biggest thing, number 10, is you need to create an environment of trust and communication in your home. That's really what it comes down to. Your kids need to feel safe talking to you. Your kids need to know that they can come to you and ask you anything, and you can explain it in age-appropriate ways. You know, like I said, you're going to tell a 5-year-old something, then you're going to tell a 15-year-old. As they get older, it's like dispensations of time, right? So dispensation, you provide a little bit more illumination to whatever the question is that they have. And then finally, once they're old enough to get married, or once it's a week before their wedding, whatever, you provide the full illumination of what's going to go on. And, you know, even with our own kids, we've said we're comfortable talking about whatever, whenever, even after you're married. But I will say too that if you are a person that's about to get married, there should be some things that remain between you and your spouse. And that would be honeymoon stories. I'm never comfortable if someone's trying to tell me their honeymoon story. I'm just not. I think that's very personal and private, and it should remain between you two, because that's the most private part of marriage, right? And we've lost privacy in today's day and age with just people blabbing out their problems all over social media. I mean, their marriage problems and just crashing out everywhere online. It's insane. Grown adults crashing out all over online. And so I know we've lost a lot of the privacy, but you should keep things very private when it comes to the physical relationship. And it's about honeymoon stories, you know, newlywed stories, just different things like that. Like for me personally, I don't want to hear anyone else's, because that's such a private thing. But all that being said, you do need to create an environment of trust and communication so that your kids won't feel awkward, or like they can't talk to you about something because you're going to freak out, or you're going to panic, or you're going to blow a gasket, or whatever it is. So, yes, I agree, Julia. She said someone who curses a lot. Julia, you like get the prize for talking the most in the chat. Like no one's talked today except Julia. Usually the chat is lit up and there's almost 15 people watching. So I don't know if it's because like this is just a more taboo subject or something. Obviously, I'm going to be very general about things because it is more taboo. I can give you guidelines, but I don't want to give you personal stories of like our kids or whatever, because that, once again, that comes to the privacy thing. There's some things I don't want online, and that's one of them. So yeah, she said someone who curses a lot feels like grating on my ears. It's hard to listen to. And the more you listen to someone speaking like that, the more likely it is to slip into your language. And that is true. And it's something that, you know, just being in this world, but not a part of the world, right? It goes back to that topic. And I feel like as Christians, the biggest way we can be separate from this world is in speech and in language. And even when it comes to this subject, we can be very cautious that we don't just get like the world where we're just like talking about it nonchalantly, acting like it's not a big deal. Because it is a big deal. This is a big deal, and there is a time and place to talk about it in, the privacy of our home, but not be crass about it, if that makes sense. And I think one of the biggest ways that we can be different from the world is this thing of language and not using explicit words and different things like that. And the sad part is that because we're in the world, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear it in public. I know men are going to hear it in the workplace. And I've known stories of people in the family who, like, they were a pastor and they got Alzheimer's. And as their minds started to go, when they got older, they started cursing. And that really affected the family members because they knew that them in their right mind would have been horrified at the words coming out of their mouth. But it just shows that because we're around it, it's just going to kind of get in us, even without us wanting to. Like, subconsciously, it's going to be in there. And that's why as Christians, we need to take charge of our tongue and what comes out of our tongue. And, obviously the family, they were like, he doesn't know, he's out of his mind. He doesn't know, he's lost his mind, whatever. But I know it hurt them because they knew he would be so horrified and so mortified that had come out of his mouth and I think this pastor was one that had been saved like early 20s or something. And they had changed their vocabulary. They had cut out all of that. So yes, I agree. It's hard to find someone you trust with whom you can talk about these private matters with. And I'm telling you, parents over friends anytime. So if you can get it in your kids' minds that you are a safe place, you are someone who they can confide in. And he says, so if parents set themselves up to be the ones that their parents can go to, that the kids can go to, that's a huge blessing for the kids. Yes, I agree. But that comes through years of trust, right? Through showing your kids the correct response and through just being calm and collected and being there for when they can talk to you, whatever. So we are the best teachers for our kids, no one else. And that's what I was telling back to the beginning. That's what I was telling the editor at the newspaper office. I'm the best kid. I'm the best teacher. Like, I know my kids better than any government school teacher. And I know what they're going to be capable of listening to and digesting and learning. And I want to be the one who determines what my kids are listening to, what my kids are learning. Because that's another thing about this homeschool bill that they were trying to pass, which is why I was talking to him. With this homeschool bill, they were putting a caveat in there that they could potentially look at our curriculum. And so I'm like, what if they decide our curriculum isn't teaching the things that they want to teach, And they're starting off the sexual education. They're starting as early as kindergarten now. And I think that's disgusting. I don't think a kindergartner is even capable of taking in information that maybe they have no curiosity in yet. Usually it doesn't happen until they start going through puberty. So they're starting this earlier and earlier. And I do believe it is causing an increase in pregnancies, STDs, all these things, which then leads to more abortions and, different things like that. So I want to be the teacher for my kids when it comes to this subject. And it needs to be a healthy part of life. And we model that and we explain that to our kids better than anyone. I feel like the boomer generation had like this, we don't talk about this type mentality. And when it came to any type of education regarding this, they were like, go talk to your friends about it. Go ask someone else about it. I don't want that for my kids. I want to be the one who decides what they're capable of hearing and at what age they're capable of hearing it and how deep that knowledge goes or how much of that knowledge is bestowed upon them. I want to be kind of the one that's in control of that because at the end of the day, us moms and dads, we know our kids the best, right? We know if something's going to affect them or something's going to linger in their mind or their curiosity, if they're able to handle it, or if this is going to cause, more problems or cause them to be overly interested in something they shouldn't at this age. So the goal for our kids is to get them from point A to B, point A being innocence to B, which is purity at the marriage altar. And then they have a whole lifetime with their spouse to figure everything out. So that's our goal. And that's kind of what we want for, yeah, I think, yeah, Maria, she said she was told to ask her older sisters. And I feel like that was the mentality. Like, I just don't want to deal with this. So go ask someone else. And we should never be too busy to answer questions for our kids, no matter how awkward it might feel. If you just act calm and just matter of fact about it and just very calm about it, they're going to be calm about it too. If you're like, oh my goodness, okay, deep breath. Okay, let's sit down. Let's talk about this. If you're all dramatic about it, they're going to be dramatic about it too. So they feed off of your energy and they feed off of your response. So you just kind of got to be calm and okay, let's talk about this. You're curious. Let's talk about this. So, yeah. And Julia said, by the time my parents even approached the topic, I had been exposed to everything in school and documentaries on TV. And, unfortunately, that is kind of the culture, especially if you're in the public school system. They're going to make sure that they've got their agenda planted in your mind and that they have what they want to program you, the way they want to program you, that's going to be in your mind. So that's always good for parents. Well, first of all, homeschool if you can. I know there's situations where you can't. But if you can homeschool, because then you are in charge of the information that your child is receiving. So anyways, I hope that was a help. The biggest takeaway is you just have to create a culture in your home of open communication and you being the one that your kid comes to with any issue, whether that's they have a concern, whether that's they've messed up, whatever it is, you have to be the source of that. So that is my advice for today. All right. So next week, I'm going to have a health topic. We're going to have Jennifer Bay on next week, and she is going to be talking about ways to lose weight and why we should lose weight as busy moms. And it'll be more of a health talk. So she does things a little bit different than me. She's been doing ketovore, I think like keto carnivore. I'm interested in hearing kind of how she does it and if it would even work for me and if it would help inflammation. Because I'm having some inflammation issues. So I'm going to pick her brain about that next week. So join us next week. But in the meantime, love God, love your husbands, and love your kids, and love them well. You do those things, everything will fall in place and you'll have a blessed life. So we will